Okay, so can you please introduce yourself and tell me about your recent project?
Yeah, hi. So I have around 3.5 years of experience as a Java full stack developer, and throughout my career, I have been worked mainly on Java, Spring Boot, REST APIs, microservices, SQL, Angular, and Spring Data JPA. And currently, I am working in the railway domain, and where like we are modernizing the legacy applications into the microservices-based architecture. And my responsibilities include like in the developing the REST APIs using the Spring Boot and integrating multiple microservices, and also like implementing the business logic and also working on the Angular UI screens whenever required. And our application is mainly like an employee portal where like employees can manage their work schedules and leave requests and like job assignments and train inbound and outbound operations. Okay, and along with development, I also work on bug fixes, feature enhancements, code reviews, and production support whenever it is required. So yeah, so this is what is all about myself and my project.
Okay, so what are the features you have developed in your current project? Can you tell me?
Yeah, sure. So, like one of the feature I have developed, is like employee leave management module. So, where like in this, when an employee applies for leave, then the request first goes to the reporting manager for approval, and once approved, then leave balances gets updated. Okay, and after that, notifications are sent to the employee, and if required, like another employee is assigned to handle that person's responsibility. So, the another person can handle those responsibilities during the leave period. Okay, so the front end is developed in Angular, and while the backend APIs are implemented using Spring Boot, and the employee information is stored in Oracle database, and different microservices like communicate through the REST APIs to complete the workflow. Okay, so we also implemented proper validation so that the employee cannot apply for like overlapping leaves or like exceed their available leaves balances and all. So yeah, so these are the logics we have applied, and this is the one of the feature which I have developed.
Okay, fine. So can you tell me what happens if you override equals but not hash code?
Yeah, so like whenever we use HashMap or hash set, then Java first uses the hash code method to identify the bucket where the object should be stored. Okay. After finding the bucket, it uses the equals method to compare objects inside the bucket. And if we override equals method but don't override hash code, then two logically equal objects may generate the different hash code. Okay, so as a result, like both objects will be stored in different buckets, and Java will never call equals because like it also compares the objects within the same bucket, right? And ultimately this will lead to the duplicate entries in the hash map or hash set and incorrect behavior. So yeah, so whenever we override equals and then we should must always override the hash code as well.
Okay, okay. So why does HashMap use both hash code and equals? Why not only equals?
Yeah, because like checking every object using equals method would require like scanning the entire collection. So that would be like be kind of very much slow. So instead, like HashMap first calculates the hash code to directly locate the correct bucket, and that makes the search like kind of much faster. And only if multiple objects exist in the same bucket, then it calls like equals method to identify the exact object. So this combination provides like kind of very good performance. So yeah.
Okay, so can a static method be polymorphic?
No, a static method belongs to the class rather than the object. Okay, so yeah, it is not polymorphic. So runtime polymorphism works through the method overriding, but the static methods cannot be overridden. So they are only hidden. Okay, so their invocation is resolved during the compile time based on the reference type. Yeah, so static method do not participate in runtime polymorphism.
Okay, then what is method hiding?
Yeah, so when a subclass defines a static method with the same signature as its parent class, then it is called method hiding. So for example, let's say parent class has display method and child also has display method. So if I write like let's say parent object equal to new child and I say like object dot display. Okay, so this is like method hiding. So parent class method will execute because like static methods are like resolved using the reference type, not the actual object. So yeah.
So suppose you are designing a payment system and that supports, let's say, the UPI, credit card, net banking, and etc. So how would polymorphism will help here?
Yeah, so like I would first, in that case, I will create the interface called like payment service, and that contains a common method like let's say pay method. Then I will create different implementations like a UPI payment or credit payment and net banking payment. So all that we can implement, and each class will provide its own implementation of the pay method. Okay. Now, whenever a payment request comes, then I will only need to call the like payment service.pay. Okay. We don't have to go explicitly and say like use UPI payment and credit card payment and all. So the correct implementation will automatically execute depending on the object, and that makes the code like kind of highly extensible. So if tomorrow a new payment method like let's say wallet has come, okay, or any other payment method is introduced, so I will need to create another implementation without modifying the existing code. Okay, so this basically follows both open close principle and polymorphism. So yeah, so that is how we will implement polymorphism here.
Okay. And how does making fields private and using getters and setters help in achieving encapsulation?
Yeah, so encapsulation means like hiding the internal data and exposing only the required operations. So by making fields private, external classes cannot be directly modify them. Okay, so instead they access data through the getters and setters method. So this provides multiple benefits like we can validate input before saving it, or we can like restrict unauthorized modification, and internal implementation also remains hidden. Okay, so yeah, so like overall encapsulation going to improve the security and also like maintainability and flexibility.
Okay. So can you give me a real world example like where getters and setters are actually you think are useful?
Yeah, sure. So suppose we have a employee class with an age field. Okay. So like without encapsulation, we have to say like then like employee dot age equal to let's say minus 10 if you say. So obviously this is invalid. Okay. But if we use a setter method, so we say like set age and then int age. So inside the setter method we can validate it. Okay. So age cannot be negative, right? So that is why when directly we will allow to set minus 10. But whenever we are doing that set age, then inside that method we can do some validation. Okay, so this will like either throw an exception or like maybe assign the default value. So any logic we can write. Okay, so similarly for other fields, let's say salary, email, or mobile number, or any kind of password is there. So for all of them, we can apply the like different business rules before actually saving the data. So yeah, that is how it can be useful.
So can we create an object of an abstract class?
Uh, Normally no, an abstract class cannot be instantiated directly because like it may contain the abstract methods without implementation. Okay. However, we can create an object of using an anonymous inner class, not abstract class. Okay. So like Java basically creates an anonymous subclass and then creates its object. So that is how actually it can be achieved. But yeah, directly we cannot.
Okay, and what is the difference between array list and linked list?
Yeah, array list is internally implemented using a dynamic array, whereas the linked list is implemented as a doubly linked list. So this is the internal implementation of both of these. And array list provides like very fast random access because like elements can be accessed directly using the indexes. However, like inserting or like deleting elements in the middle is like slower because all subsequent elements need to be shifted. Okay, and linked list on the other hand is efficient for like frequent insertion and deletion because like it only updates the node references. Okay, but like searching is slower in this case because it has to traverse the like list sequentially. So if my application let's say performs mostly read operations, then I will prefer array list. Okay, and if it performs the frequent insertion and deletion, especially in the middle, then linked list is better for those kind of scenarios. So yeah.
Okay, so can you tell me why does Java throws concurrent modification exception?
Yeah, so if we like modify a collection directly while iterating over it using the iterator, then Java throws the concurrent modification exception. So for example, let's say I am like iterating over the array list and call the like list.remove directly inside the loop. Then the iterator detects that the collection has been modified and then unexpectedly like it will throw the exception. Okay, so like it mainly detects the programming mistakes basically. So collections like ArrayList and HashMap maintain an internal modification count called like mod count. Okay, so when a like iterator is created, then it stores the current value of mod count. Okay, while iterating, if the like iterator finds the mod count has been changed, then it will throw the concurrent modification exception. So basically this is called the fail fast behavior. So yeah.
Okay. So what is this the difference between fail fast and fail safe?
Yeah, so fail first iterator works on the original collection. Like I said, like if the collection is modified while iterating, for example, let's say we are using array list, hash map, or hash set, then it will throw the concurrent modification exception. So in this scenario, we say like it is fail fast. So fail safe iterator works on the copy of the collection instead of original one. So for example, we have copy on right array list, concurrent hash map iterator. So like in these are basically the copy of the, let's say we are using array list. So copy of right array list basically the copy of the initial object.
Okay. So now can you tell me why is concurrent hash map preferred over collections dot synchronized map?
Yeah, so actually both provides thread safety, but current HashMap performs much better in multi-threaded application. So like when in collections dot synchronized map, the entire map is locked for every operation. So if one thread is performing a write operation, then all other threads have to wait. Okay, even if they want to read the different keys. But concurrent HashMap allows multi-threaded to multiple threads to work simultaneously on different buckets. So it uses like kind of, we can say, fine-grained locking instead of like locking the entire map. So just that a specific bucket only it will be locked. So because of this, it will result like higher concurrency and better throughput, and also like the performance will be better for the heavy loads and all. So that's why I think concurrent HashMap is generally preferred in the like enterprise applications.
Okay. And what happens if two threads insert different keys simultaneously?
Yeah, if the keys belong to different buckets, then both head can insert the values simultaneously without blocking each other. Okay, and if both keys fall into the same bucket, then synchronization is applied only on that bucket, so not on the entire map. Okay, so only one thread waits while the others like they can complete. So yeah.
Okay, fine. So can you tell me what is the difference between map and flat map?
Yeah, sure. So the map operation transforms one object into another object. So for example, suppose I have a list of employees and I want only their names. Then we can use like map then employee and then like get name we can just say. So it will give us the list of employees, and the output becomes the list of names. Okay. So and on the other hand, suppose if we say like flat maps, and then it is used like when each element itself contains another collection. So kind of nested collection is there. So for example, suppose I have list of students and each student has a list of subjects, then we can use map and then we will get like list of subject. But if I use flat map, then it will flatten the everything into single list. Like we will get the list of subject directly. So yeah, so map basically performs on one-to-one of transformation, and flat map transforms like one-to-many transformation, and it flattens the nested collection.
Can method reference be used with overloaded methods?
Yeah, we can use that. So method references can be used with overloaded methods as long as the compiler can determine which method to call based on the functional interfaces. So if multiple overloaded methods match and the compiler cannot decide, then it becomes like kind of ambiguous. So in that situation, we should use lambda expression instead. So yeah, but we can use the method references with overloaded methods.
Okay. And why do we use optional?
Yeah, optional is mainly used to avoid null pointer exceptions. So instead of returning null, a method can return an optional object. So the caller can safely check whether a value is present before accessing it. So that makes the code like kind of much safer and easier to understand. So yeah.
Okay. So what are the differences between optional dot off, of nullable and empty?
Of nullable and empty. Okay, so optional.off should be used only when we are sure the value is never null. So if we pass a null to optional.off, then it immediately throws null pointer exception. Okay, and optional.off nullable accepts both nulls and not null values. So if the values is null, then it will return an empty optional instead of throwing an exception. So that's a difference between these two. And then coming to optional.empty, so that simply creates an empty optional object. So in real objects, in real projects, we mostly use like optional.off nullable. So because it safely handles both cases, so normally we use that. But yeah, it all depends on the scenarios.
And is calling optional.get is the good practice?
Not directly. So if the optional.empty calling get method, then it will throw no such element exception like that. So instead, we should first check using the is present, or even better, we can use methods like or else get, or else throw, or if present. So we can use these methods. So these methods make the code like cleaner and reduce the chances of runtime exceptions. So yeah.
Okay, so what is compare and swap? Can you tell me?
Yeah, so CAS basically stands for compare and swap. So it is a lock-free algorithm basically. So suppose any value is equal to 10, then like thread 1 expects 10 and it changes it to 20. So before updating, JVM checks like if the current value. So before updating it, like JVM checks like if the current value double equal to expected value. So if it is yes, then update is succeeded. In the other hand, like if any other thread already changed it, then that subsequent 10 would have been become 30. So in that case, compare and swap like that fails. Okay, so thread retires in that case. So this avoids the like expensive locking. So Java like internally uses CAS in atomic integer and concurrent HashMap and long adder. So in these cases it will add, but it is used internally actually. But yeah, we should we should know that internally working.
Okay, okay, fine. Okay, so can you tell me what are Spring Boot starter dependencies?
Yeah, Spring Boot starter dependencies are pre-configured dependency bundles that simply project setup. So instead of adding multiple individual libraries manually, Spring Boot provides starter dependencies that automatically include all required libraries. So for example, if we want to build REST APIs instead of adding, then Spring various things we can add, right? So Spring MVC, Jackson, validation, logging libraries and all. So instead of that, we can simply like say like Spring Boot starter web. So it will automatically add all these things. Okay. And similarly, suppose for database operations, if we just write Spring Boot starter data JPA, then it will automatically add all related things. Okay. And similarly, we have actuator, security. So we have different starters for all these also. Okay. So ultimately, using this, we can reduce the dependent conflicts and all because it automatically downloads the related libraries and all. Related versions also. So we don't have to manage all those things. So this is the advantage of using starter dependencies.
Okay, okay. And what is the difference between add component, add service, and add repository?
Yeah, so basically all these three are stereotype annotations. So internally, all of them are like meta annotated with the array of component. Okay, so Spring scans them and creates beans automatically. So the main difference is the main difference is in their included purpose. Okay, so add component is like generic Spring bean, and as we know, like add service is like we use for the service whatever the service classes we are using, and add repository for the repository ones. Okay, so that's the difference between these three. So yeah.
Okay, and can we use add repository on a service class and add service on a repository class?
Yeah, we can do that. Technically, the application will still work because all three annotations internally use add component, right? So Spring will still detect the bin. However, it is considered as bad practice. So, for example, if we say like any employee service has add repository, so this will create the bin, but it will developers will get confused, okay, and layer responsibilities becomes kind of unclean. And one more, the major problem is like add repository. So So that kind of that apart from creating bin, it also performs exception translations. So like for example, whenever we have database exceptions like SQL exception or something, so that is automatically converted into Spring unchecked exception like data access exception and all. So that makes exception handling much easier. But when we are transforming these, in that case, we won't be able to see these kind of exceptions. So it will be like, so basically this is not a good practice. But yeah, we can use it. If you can use or not, then we can use it.
Okay, can you tell me dependency injection?
Yeah, dependency injection means Spring creates the required objects and injects them automatically instead of us creating them manually. So without dependency injection, like we can just say, for example, let's say employee repository object equal to new employee repository. So in this case, the service is tightly coupled. Okay, so Spring automatically injects the repository. Suppose we say so let's say we are using dependency injection, right? So in that case, actually, Spring automatically injects the repository. So advantage of it is like it will be the loose coupling will be there, and it will be easier for testing and better maintainability. Okay, so that is why we used dependency injection.
Okay, and what are the different types of dependency injection?
Yeah, so it has basically three types of injection. So one is the constructor injection, then setter injection, and then field injection. So out of these three, like constructor injection is more recommended,
Okay,
and
so can you tell me the bean scopes in Spring?
yeah, so bean scopes defines how many instances Spring creates for a bean. So we have like a singleton bean, so that is the basically default bean. So in this case, only one instance is created for the entire application. So like entry request gets the same object. So sorry, every request gets the same object. So that's the purpose of the singleton bean. Okay, so that is a singleton. Then coming to prototype, so we just say scope equal to scope add to scope and then singleton, and then for prototype similarly we say add a scope like prototype. So in this case, a new object is created every time the bean is requested. Okay, so and then coming to next scope is I think request scope. So this is like a one bean per HTTP request. So that is the meaning of that. This is commonly used for the request specific data. Okay, and then we have session scope. So one bean per user session. So that is the meaning of that. So mostly used in the web applications. And then we have application scope. So that is like one bean shared across the all entire servlet context. So that is the application scope. So yeah.
Okay, and if prototype bean is injected into singleton bean, then why does it behave like singleton? Can you tell me?
Yeah, so this is one of the like we can say commonly used things. So suppose let's say we have any engine classes there, and that is we say on top of that like add the scope prototype. Okay, and that is a component, let's say, and then say, suppose we have another class called class car, let's say, and that is the service. Okay, and then when Spring creates the singleton car bin, then it injects like one instance of the prototype engine, and after that Spring never replaces the reference. Okay, so therefore, although the engine is like prototype scoped, but the singleton car keeps using the same engine instance, so it behaves like a singleton. So that is why like if prototype bin is injected into singleton bin, then it behaves like singleton.
Okay, and what is Spring Boot auto configuration?
Yeah, so auto configuration is one of the Spring Boot's biggest advantages. So Spring Boot automatically configures beans based on like dependencies present in the class path or configuration properties, and also based on the existing beans. So for example, if Spring Boot finds, let's say Spring Boot started data JPA, okay, and let's say like MySQL connector, okay, so it automatically configures the data source entity manager and Hibernate, and without writing the XML or Java configuration. So we don't have to separately write that. So
Okay, fine, that is fine. So, can you tell me in steps, like how would you design a REST API in Spring Boot, like step by step, how you proceed for that?
yeah, so if I have to design any REST APIs in a Spring Boot, then the first step will be to understanding the business requirement. So that will be the first step. We have to gather all the information, like so that we can easily prepare the whatever the task lists, and you can split it into the user stories. Okay, and then we have to identify the REST endpoints. So for example, let's say the requirement is like we have to we have the employees table, okay, and we have to get the list of employees, like, or maybe insert the data or like delete the data of the employees. So something like that, we have the requirement. So in that case, we have to identify, like we have to say like get. So get request will be there, then get of employee, then based on the ID we can do the get operation, then we can also do the post operation, we can do the put operation, we can do a delete operation. So all these things we have to identify, okay, and after that once we have this information, then we can start creating the controller. And in the controller, on the top of that, we just say at the rest controller, and like in the request mapping, we can just say like /employees, and further at the method label we can start writing like or this get, post, put or delete methods, okay. Basically CRUD operations we can write there. And then we can create the DTOs for the request and response, okay. And next step will be like we can also do the validations, like we can use add to valid annotation, and using that we can do the validation, and then further we can implement the business logic in the service layer, okay. And then we will also be having the repository layer, so we can interact with the databases using the repository layer. And further after that we can return the proper HTTP status code, like we have okay 200 or 201 created, or maybe 2014 if no content is there, or 404 not found, or 400. So all those like status codes we can prepare as and return as per the response. And also like one more point is like we can add global exception handling. So at the top controller advice usually we use, so that we don't have to add multiple places, like multiple exceptions of similar type. So those things we can aggregate using the list global exception handling. And then we can also like secure the APIs using the Spring security and JWT, okay. So these things we can implement. So yeah, so these are the steps we can follow in order to create the REST API in Spring Boot. Yeah.
Okay, so as you talked about the JWT, so can you explain me how JWT authentication works in Spring Boot?
Yeah, sure. So JWT basically is a stateless authentication mechanism. So that is used to securely identify users without storing session data on the server. And the authentication flow works first of all, let's say in the step one, we have to first of all do the user login, okay. So the client sends the credential to the authentication endpoint, so it will be a post request and login has to be done. So we can give like username and password in the JSON, and we can do that. And then after that we have the next step as authentication. So Spring security verifies the username and password using like user detail service, or maybe authentication manager, or password encoder, whatever we have used. And if credentials are correct, then authentication is succeeded, okay. And then coming to step 3, we can like a JWT token generation. So that is the next step we can say after that. So the server generates the JWT token as soon as the authentication succeeded. So JWT token are is having the 3 parts. So first part is header, then we have payload, and then we have signature. So it will be like header dot, then some payload will be there, dot, again the signature will be there, okay. So header basically contains the algorithm information, so like HS256 or something, and then it will have type. Similarly, the payload will have like user related information. So it can have like username, role, or expiry when it has to expire. So these informations will be there in the payload. Okay. So then signature will be there. Okay. So that is created using the secret key like HS256 or maybe RSA or something. Okay. So it depends what we are using. And then we have next step will be like client storage LLD. Okay. So usually like it is stored in HTTP only cookies. So and also it can be like it might be local storage also. So it is stored in the client system. Okay. And after every API call, the client sends like authorization and then the bearer as a key, and the key will be there. So like that it will be going to every server request. Okay, and after that we will have the JWT filter. So Spring Security like intercepts every request, and the JWT filter like it reads the authorization header, and then further it validates the token and checks the expiry also, and it will also extract the username, and then it will load the user detail and create the authentication object, and it will store it inside the security context. So now the controllers knows like who is logged in user is, and yeah, so these are the steps basically I can say like JWT token has.
Okay, so do you know the difference between at valid and at validated?
At valid and add validated. Yeah, so add valid, as I told you, right? So it comes from like Jakarta validation not valid. So it is mainly used for the request bodies. So like in the whenever we write any REST API, so just to see if the like whatever like suppose we are saving it. Okay, so while saving the request, on top of that we can just say like add a request body, on top of that we can say add valid, and then we can check like okay that is valid or not. And add validated basically it comes from Spring. So like Spring has add validated, so it supports like path variables, request parameters, method parameters, so all these things it supports. So yeah, so that is the basically so add validated is basically we can say it is a Java validation, and add validated is the Spring validation basically. Okay, so add valid does this request body level validation, and add validated does the like method label, params, path variables, all those validation. So yeah, so that's the difference between these two.
Okay, can you explain Spring Boot scheduler?
Yeah, so Spring Scheduler is used to execute tasks automatically at fixed intervals. So first, we have to enable the scheduling, so that we can use like at the rate of enable scheduling, and then we can like do at the rate of scheduled, and then fixed rate we can give. So that means like it at every 5 seconds or something, whatever timing we have given, it will be keep on running. Okay, and then we have another options is like at the rate of scheduled and then fixed delay. Okay, so yeah, so basically the difference between these two is like fixed rate is like next execution starts like every let's say 5 seconds, whatever we have given, regardless of the previous execution time. And fixed delay is like next execution starts like 5 seconds after the previous execution finishes. So that's the basic difference between these two. So we can use any of these two to run that. And then we also have cron expression. So cron jobs we run. So add schedule, then cron we write like let's say 0 0 1 start something like that. So it will just say like it will run every day at 1 p.m. or 1 a.m. like that. So yeah, so that is how we use that. So in real in the today live basis we use it like while sending the emails or daily reports or as per the business requirement. So in batch jobs. Yeah.
Okay, and what is Spring Boot actuator?
Yeah, so actuator basically provides the production ready monitoring endpoints. So there are various useful endpoints like actuator health is there, actuator info is there, okay, matrix is there, okay. So these are the various endpoints are there. So like let's say matrix we have, so that will tell the JVM memory, CPU, HTTP request response time and all, okay. And we also have environment. So environment properties it will tell. We have beans, so it will list out all the beans and all. So yeah, so that is what is the actuator endpoints are. So we can do all production monitoring, health checks and all. So everything we can do using this actuator.
Okay, and what is the logging framework have you used?
Yeah, so in my project, I have used like centralized logging using the ELK stack. Okay, so ELK stands for basically Elasticsearch, the logs test, and then Kibana. Okay, so sometimes like FileBit is also used for the log shipping. So the flow will be something like application runs, then it will invoke the log back, and then like logs test it will invoke further, and then Elasticsearch will be invoked, and then Kibana dashboard will be shown. So that is how it works. Yeah.
Okay, so let's say any customer reported that an API has failed, but you don't know like where it failed. Okay, so how would you start debugging it? Can you tell me?
Yeah. So if they have just said that it has failed, then my approach would be like to collect the trace ID or correlation ID from the client or API gateway. So that is the first thing we can do, and then we can search the trace ID in Kibana, and then we can follow the request flows across all microservices, and then we can identify like which service returned an error. Okay, so that is how we will come to know like which service has actual issue. Okay, and after that we can check the stack trace and HTTP status code and timestamps, and we can verify the all downstream dependencies like database, Kafka, Redis, or any external APIs. Those things we can check, and if required we can reproduce this issue in lower environment also using the same request payload. So those things we can do to double check like the issue is exactly it is there, and once the root cause is identified, then we can fix the issue and verify it with like logs and monitoring. So that is how we can fix it. Yeah.
Okay, so what is the difference between REST template, web client, and OpenFin?
Yeah, so REST template is the, we can say, older style of making the synchronous HTTP response. Okay, so we used to do like REST template dot exchange, and then we used to give like URL, HTTP method, and entity. Okay, so all those things we used to give. So it was easy and simple, but it has cons also. Like it is deprecated for the new applications, and it is kind of blocking. And then we have the web client. So web client was introduced in Spring Web Flux, so it is non-blocking actually and reactive. So like we can just say web client dot get, and we can give the URL. Okay, and then we can do that. So it has advantages like it is high performance and is non-blocking and better for like thousands of concurrent requests. Okay, so that is why we usually use this web client. And then OpenFin is like this declarative REST client. Okay, so there is no boilerplate code in this case. So this actually we write on the, let's say we have any employee client is there, so on top of that we can give annotation like at the rate of fin client, and then we can give like name and employee service and all we can give. And then we have like get employees there. Okay, so we can just say at the rate of get mapping, and we can start doing like we write the controller class. Similarly, we will have the interface will be there, so in that all the kind of get mapping, post put mapping we can give there. So that's the difference between these. Yeah.
Okay, so why is web client is faster than REST template?
Yeah, so REST template is blocking. So suppose 100 requests arrive. So 100 threads becomes like blocking and waiting for the response. So 100 requests, so 100 threads will be waiting. Okay, and lots of memory consumption will also happen. So that's a drawback of REST template. And web client is non-blocking. So one thread can process multiple threads. Okay, so if 100 requests come, then few event loop threads, and then callbacks will be keep on happening. Okay, so it uses basically because of this much lower memory uses and better scalability.
Okay, so what is service discovery?
Yeah, so in microservices, like IP addresses keep changing. So hard coding the IP address is impossible in that case. So like let's say we have any inventory service. So today let's say it is like 10.1. Let's say 1.5. Tomorrow it can be some different IP. Okay, to solve this we use the service discovery, and the most popular implementation is like we can use for example Netflix Eureka. So in this case like the URL will be dynamically generated, and we don't have to worry about that which URL is getting generated. Okay, so in this case the flow will be like inventory service will be there, and it registers with Eureka, and then order service, and then it asks Eureka if we order any service, and then it will further ask to Eureka, and Eureka will get the current IP and it further calls the service. So it is not like that service call. So there will be no hard-coded URLs will be there. Okay.
Okay, so can you tell me the API gateway, basically its responsibilities?
Yeah, so API gateway basically acts as a single entry point for all client requests. Okay, so instead of client calling the every service directly, so they can call the API gateway. That is the only one URL we can say. Okay, so it is like client like it calls the API gateway, and then API gateway calls the employee service, and then whatever service is there, let's say order service is there, and then that will call the payment service and so on. Okay, so apart from the single entry point, it has various responsibilities like authentication, authorization, okay, and then routing, rate limiting, logging, and then SSL termination, load balancing, request transformation. So all those things also can be done here. Yeah.
Okay, so can you tell me how would you handle a slow microservice?
Yeah, so suppose like order service calls payment service, and payment service is taking, let's say, 30 seconds. Okay, so in this case, like we can first of all configure the timeout, okay, and retry only for the transient failures, and we can use the exponential backups and all. Okay, and for example, let's say we say retry 1, so that will take like 1 second. Retry 2, let's say 2 seconds. Retry 3 took 4 seconds. Okay, so we can configure the circuit breakers, and then we can return the fallback response. Okay, so like something like that, we can just say like payment service is currently temporarily unavailable, please try again later, something like that we can do. Okay, and after that we can like monitor using the Parametheus and Grafana, and we can analyze logs using the Kibana, so we can start doing these things. Yeah.
Okay, so let's say service A calls service B and service B suddenly goes down. So what will you do in this case?
Yeah, so in this case, like we can configure the reasonable timeouts to avoid any kind of hanging request. So like we can enable the retry only for the transient failures with the exponential backups. Okay, and also we can configure a circuit breaker using the resilience 4J, and we can return a meaningful fallback response to the client. Okay, and after that we can publish the alerts to monitoring tools like Prometheus or Grafana, and we can check logs using the Kibana and trace IDs. Okay, and further we can investigate root cause before restoring traffic. So yeah, so these things we can do. Yeah.